What's up, Shred Sexies? Welcome back. Death to the Fingers. Looks like we're doing a bonus episode this week. I made a mention, of course, in one of the videos prior that you should be listening to and seeking out new music, if you will, so that you can, interject new influences into your playing and stuff like that. Of course, someone's like, well, can you make a few suggestions? So I've chosen 3, and we'll do this video, intermittently throughout the year and stuff like that when I come up with new ones and I have the time. Basically, we have the commercial sort of release that'll appeal to almost everyone. Then you have the more sort of musicianship centered release where it's more about, the level of musicality tends to be the sort of high point. And then we have the experimental one where it's just going to be out in left field, and that can mean a whole bunch of stuff. Today it's extreme metal, but who knows if you're into things like the Velvet Underground or other sort of more abstract forms of music, then you'll be into it. Trust me, the one we're going to be talking about is definitely musical. It's not as crazy as that, the Velvet Underground, but it is definitely out there for sure. So before we even get into that, though, I've got another comment with respect to dealing with haters on the internet and stuff like that. So the first thing is listen, this is the internet. That's just the name of the game, boys. So you're just going to have to deal with it as it sort of rolls in. And just listen, it's water off a duck's back. There are always going to be disgruntled people that take umbrage with what you're doing. It doesn't matter what it is. And you have to understand there's a bifurcation in the music community now. You have people that use music as a stepping stone but aren't very good musicians. They post memes, they do polls, they show pictures and stuff. I started to notice this pattern. There's one sort of like huge channel or whatever feed on Twitter and stuff like that. All they ever do is post basically Fender guitars. So you can pretty much tell that that is a Fender shill, if you will, paid for by the company to promote their products. Then over here, you've got the Gibson shill. And you have the Marshall shill. You have the vintage gear shill. Like, these people never put videos of themselves playing music or anything like that, or being like, look, I wrote a new song using this vintage gear or whatever else it is. It's always this sort of feeding into the consumerist mindset, which I believe is a sickness. You can give me a $5,000 guitar or a $500 guitar, and I'll make that guitar sing no matter what, whether it's with a super crappy amp or whatever else. And it wouldn't even matter that much to me as long I would rather the prospect of playing through the worst gear possible than not playing at all. So that should be essentially the starting point for everybody. And listen, I'm not trying to make a judgment, if you will, with respect to these huge channels or feeds on Twitter and stuff like that and other social media accounts or whatever. With respect to what they're doing, I don't care. I'm indifferent to it. I don't follow them, right? But at the same time, there's a huge following over there that are like, thinking that they can do the bare minimum and post some pictures of their $2,000 guitar or whatever it is, somehow puts them in the same sort of bracket as the people that put their head down for 10 years and grind it out with actually learning how to play music, creating good music. Right? They get jealous irrationally and stuff like that because I believe deep down inside that they would love to be that person, you or me or whoever it is, but ultimately cannot find the internal motivation to rise to the challenge and then apply themselves diligently over the span of years or decades, in my case, to really put all the pieces together and be the best musician they can be. You know what I mean? They don't want to. They want to watch videos where they're taught verbatim songs and solos. They don't want to learn it by ear. They don't want to figure out the mechanics, the theoretical mechanics, nothing. Just be like, show me how to play this. And that's it. That's the extent of their interest and stuff like that. So when they see someone who has sort of developed the skills to be more natural and can be more flexible in those types of situations, they get an irrational hate on for them. And basically, you see this expressed as either a mean comment or whatever. They dislike or downvote your video or whatever it is. I can tell you I've been on YouTube, not like making videos, although I have been making videos on YouTube on and off for a long time. It's like 2008 or 9 or something like that. But I took all those old videos down, but I've been on YouTube and in the community, if you will, for like since 2007, really when it came out. That was a big deal. I was like, this is awesome. TV on the internet? No way. I knew that that was a game changer right then and there. But I can tell you the number of times I've actually, disliked a video is basically zero, because I'm a mature adult and I just move on. Right? So just, you ought to be more zen. In a world full of mediocrity, if you start to stand out, it's like a bucket of crabs. Everybody rushes in and tries to drag you back down. And you can see that. Go watch Jared Dine's new video with respect to the shred people. Okay? Look, no disrespect to Jared or anybody else. You do your own thing, man. But if you spend all of that time trying to make a perfect solo or whatever else it is, and then spend equally as much time trying to make a perfectly air guitared video, right? It's funny. My buddy Huntinator sent me a message yesterday and was like, "Have you seen those new raw uncut videos of Eddie Van Halen?" I saw one just yesterday, Top Jimmy, of him just playing in the studio and stuff like that. And then that's when people fully realize how magical and amazing these people were, with nothing, fractions of the level of technology we have, an amp with a couple pedals, man, and just a guitar. And they're the absolute masterful, right? So, that used to be the norm. Everybody shot for that, but then we kept lowering the bar down until we got to like the grunge years, and then it was just a few bands that actually sort of carried the torch, but they were like considered old dinosaurs by that time. So music took a major level hit, and now, of course, we've had a good 15 or 20 years of mediocrity. So, of course, now that people are like, well, I want to change. I want to, maybe not go as extreme as some of these really crazy technical bands like Archspire or Artificial Brain or something like that. But instead, they're like, I just want to be at the 80s level sort of high-end musicianship where I can play some really badass solos and write some cool tunes and stuff like that and just explore music. They hate that. They absolutely hate it because you're showing them up, and they hate that even more. They're like, I want to do nothing but still get respect. And of course, when you do your thing and they see it, they're like, you're disrespecting me in your own little way, even though it has nothing to do with it. And of course, they have a hissy fit meltdown and you get what ensues. So ignore the haters. I know I kind of maybe went on there a little bit more than I should have, but this is a common problem. And honestly, the reason I'm going on about it is because this can destroy your motivation. One mean comment can actually, start to eat away at your self-esteem and stuff. So just water off a duck's back and just head down and concentrate on the music, and then just do your own thing. Live in your own sphere. And the people that actually sort of appreciate what you're doing, like the people from the Death to the Fingers crowd, will rally behind you and just, be humble and work towards an altruistic goal, which is, of course, being the best musician that you can be. Done. Let's get into these albums. All right, first on the list here is Enchant's Juggling 9 or Dropping 10. I think this is like the 4th or 5th album by the band. Can't really say what the earlier stuff is like, because honestly, this is, I think, one of the only albums I got by them. It was just a rando pick. I think it was like, buy 5 CDs for $20. I had 4 in my hand. I'm like, yeah, this one looks kind of cool. You know how it is back in the old days when you just look at the album cover and be like, yeah, that's cool. Meatloaf, anyone? Was anybody else slightly disappointed until they got older and you're like, yeah, no, it's pretty badass, but when you're a kid and you're listening to Motley Crue, not so much, right? So, yeah, lesson learned. Same thing, I was going to say Black Sabbath. No, Deep Purple, the best of Deep Purple. There's an album where the guitar is kind of like on fire and sparks are coming out. It's all purple and stuff like that. And man, I cried. I cried when I got home because my brother was like, oh, I'm going to get this album over here. And I was like, which one do you think I should get? He's like, get that one there. You know how brothers are. And man, I went home and I cried. Oh man, the good old days. Anyways, Enchant. this is a really fun album. It's proggy and the music is complex, but still immediately accessible. There's a little bit of everything on here. There's some rockers. There's some more subdued content, you know, balladry almost. And it's just a solid listen all the way through. I never found myself getting bored with listening to this music. It's something that you can put on in the background and just be like every 5 minutes or so, pick up in the moment and be like, yeah, damn, that's awesome. And that's really what you're looking for. And of course, these guys had an incredible gift with respect to writing interesting songs, but in a relatively simple format. I'm not talking like, you know, maybe some versions of Porcupine Tree and other bands in that area, maybe even straying further into like early Radiohead stuff. I mean, they just have this ability to incorporate the prog element into the more rock elements and essentially create this really great balance of the two where none of them over or outcompetes the other one. It doesn't overpower one element and it doesn't outcompete each other. They don't try to go super technical and bounce back and forth and all the rest of that. So this is most definitely an album I think you should check out. Obviously, with respect to this stuff, what I like to do is when I'm working on other things, I just kind of put this on in the background and off to the races you go. Since YouTube is a thing, it's almost assuredly on the internet, but I'm sure you could probably snag a copy of this almost anywhere for like $5. So it's definitely worth having in hard copy if you collect CDs like I do. But outside of that, I can think of nothing wrong with this album per se. And it's just another great band that almost nobody's actually heard of that produces a really high quality of music and that's highly entertaining. Next. All right, next here we have this Dolly's Dilemma. This is basically a Dream Theater knockoff in their own way, of course. So if you're a real big fan of like the early Dream Theater stuff, say Images and Words and Awake, this is definitely for you. There is tons of proggy moments. There's all kinds of guitar and keyboard wizardry going on here. Great vocals, awesome songwriting. Most of the songs, basically all of them, are top shelf. There are no boring elements or moments in this album and stuff like that. It's not very well known. I think they only put out the one album and then probably broke up, you know, because that was during the prog heyday kind of situation and competition was fierce. But I really love how this band just kind of came out of left field and essentially in their own way went toe to toe with one of the giants of the genre, Dream Theater, right? And you know, honestly, I can't say it's as good as Images and Words because obviously it's not. That was an album that I was like, yeah, this pulled me under. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. I really love that sort of Petrucci lick there where he goes super fast, you know, right before they get into the chorus. that kind of turned everybody's head. But then when I bought the album, you know, I was like, well, maybe there's some more gold on here. And then, you know, you hear Under a Glass Moon and The Sleeper and the Key or whatever the hell that is, you know, and all the other ones, you're just like Learning to Live. You're just like, damn, holy smokes, is that ever good? But this is definitely comparable, right? There's not too many albums I would actually want to be, you know, in my possession, if you will, on a desert island. And, you know, I would say probably Images of Words and Or Awake. Either of those ones could be comfortably in my possession if I were on a desert island. This one, Dolly's Dilemma, Symphony X. There's about 3 or 4 in there. You could choose, pick one. They're all amazing. You know, so all of a sudden just insert 2 more, you know, maybe a Pink Floyd album in there and whoever else you're kind of into. But these guys are definitely worthy of a spin and stuff like that. And of course, you're going to hear another take on the whole Dream Theater thing, which is probably the most important thing. Same thing with Symphony X. None of these bands really sort of copies the other one too much. I mean, Dolly's Dilemma is definitely closer to Dream Theater than Symphony X, but still, I felt like it was its own entity and really on the strength of the songwriting and stuff like that, since almost every song is just killer. And there's always these great moments of musicianship. it definitely deserves a spin from people that are just like, you know, I want to be introduced to higher order forms of music like Dream Theater that isn't Dream Theater, but doesn't get into like the super pretentious zone where it's just like, you know, it's so over the top. You're just like, this has stopped being musical for me. And I think that's the thing that this band maintained, was a sense of musicalness, if you will, that, and as you know, the sensibility to not take things to an overt extreme. Like, it's technical enough to be like, damn, that solo was badass, but it's not so technical that you're like, okay, I'm done being barraged with 2 million parts in the first 15 minutes of the album, which obviously is a big selling point. Sometimes Dream Theater can take it to an extreme, but usually that didn't actually happen until later. And really, I think they kind of lost a step there because they just started, tilling the same ground over and over and over again. Because, once you develop a huge fandom, you kind of get locked into a certain degree about what you can do and how creative you can get and all the rest. That's just my personal opinion. Because it seems like the band kind of just stopped after 6 degrees of inner turbulence or whatever that was. They just or train of thought, really. They kind of stopped really experimenting and instead just fell back on the tried and true and done. And so that's not so great. But Dolly's Dilemma is definitely a really great album here. I would highly recommend you check it out. Put the headphones on and just drift away and just be amazed at some really killer musicianship. Next. All right, last on the list here, and we're out in left field now. Basically, this is the, this is out there extreme metal. So I'm not going to lie, it's definitely not going to appeal to a lot of people. But that's just it. You need to listen to music like this or some other sort of variant of this. Maybe it's not in the extreme metal. Like I said, the Velvet Underground is another one that sort of takes it to an extreme, but is more in like the whatever art rock realm. And there are other bands that do this too. So it's up to you to sort of find, where your line in the sand is, if you will, with respect to what you can handle in terms of abrasiveness, with respect to the listening experience. And start to subject yourself to more of that so that you can figure out, how far you can push music before it stops becoming musical, I guess you could say, right? And in this case, Monumention is the perfect marriage of extreme metal and sort of like more psychedelic and prog elements. Now, listen, this is the middle album of a triumvirate of albums that they put out. I think it was around the 2000s, which was Marjoram, Beyond the Within, which is a lot more extreme, but still pretty experimental and one of my favorite albums of all time. Then Monumention, of course. This is legendary. And of course, the next release was even more legendary in Below the Lights. And of course, the whole discography by this band is top shelf. But again, you have to sort of decide for yourself whether you can actually handle the extremity, if you will, that these guys can get into. And that's really just it, is if you listen to too much music that plays it safe and whatnot, it kind of dulls your brain a little bit and sort of takes the edge off your level of creativity. So listening to bands that push the envelope, whether it's these guys or someone else, arms you with the tools to be like, well, they did it. Why can't I? And you'd be surprised at the end result of that, because honestly, sometimes the more weird stuff that you're doing will end up being the stuff that you like the most and are probably the most proud of when it comes to actually releasing your own music, because you're like, it's truly unique. This is truly a representation of who I am. And that's just it. I can't think of another band at this time that sounded anything like these guys at all. And by this time, extreme metal is already massive. It's already very big. So that's no easy trick. And so that's why it's important to bring these influences in and basically sort of subject yourself to it. And again, it's like almost anything. Exercising is one, drinking coffee or watching certain sports Like I found myself watching this crazy bocce ball tournament. It was 3 hours long. At first, I'm like, all right, whatever. I don't even know why I clicked on it in the first place. I think it was because when I scrolled over it, this guy made this amazing shot. Of course, it was just a highlight. But then I just got right into it, and I sat there and I watched 3 hours of these people throwing this little ball around. It's like lawn bowling, or I don't know. I don't even know what the rules are. It's like curling, but with balls and grass. I don't know, whatever. So, you know, you just have to sort of take a chance and be open. And that's just it right there. Is too many people, again, cloister off their mind to be like, well, I don't like this, so I don't think I can actually learn anything from it. And nothing can be farther from the truth. Maybe, granted, Enslaved's not going to be your cup of tea. I respect that. But the question becomes immediately after that is, okay, well, which bands are you listening to that put out music that you would consider to be like on the very edge of what you can handle musically? Before you're like, this isn't music anymore, it's just trash. You know what I mean? And you get that. You can listen to a band like Tetragrammaton from, I think they're from the Philippines or somewhere over there in Southeast Asia and all the rest of that stuff. And holy smokes, so these guys ever out there. It's just it's an absolute barrage. It's the equivalent to nuking your ears. Right? So, I mean, if you think extreme enslaved is extreme, well, this is like vanilla compared to what these guys are doing over here. And there are lots of those bands. You start getting into grindcore and whatnot, Brutal Truth and Peg Destroyer and countless other ones like that. And great one from Canada, Fuck the Facts. Just saying. All of a sudden, you start to gain a new appreciation for, you know, what's possible. And that really is a big step for you creatively, because if you don't, you'll stagnate to a certain degree. And so that's why I'm kind of putting these out here. It's just, you need music in a certain way, recorded music that's already recorded, to help inspire you to, you know, grow out of your current, you know, level of comfortability. You just start to expand out and be like, okay, I can start drawing in these new influences and stuff like that. Maybe you'll listen to Monument and be like, really? They're busting out a flute solo in the middle of this black metal song? What? You know, sort of Rivers of Nile did the same thing with saxophone. You're like, how does that work? Saxophone in a proggy death metal band surprisingly works really well. Go listen to their new song, man. It kind of speaks for itself. I mean, that's a good band. I was like, got turned on to them a couple years ago, and I was like, I don't want to like these guys for whatever reason, you know, just because I'm old. But damn, they're a very good band, and their music is definitely worth checking out. But that's another video altogether. So, Monumention by Enslaved. And of course, once you kind of dip your toe into that pond, I'm sure you'll be, use that as a jumping off point. Just type in, other music related to or that sounds similar to, you know, this particular album. And then you'll get a trillion suggestions on the internet. You can just start combing through them kind of thing. And you'll eventually find one that you're like, this is really, really awesome. And job's done, right? A mission accomplished, if you will. Because at the end of the day, you have to constantly be making yourself feel a little bit uncomfortable about, you know, the kind of content that you're consuming, you know, sort of, again, whatever you're comfortable with. But of course, if you're too comfy with stuff and you're not changing it up enough, then, you know, like, again, I had some worship guys basically talking to them. And they're asking me questions about how to spruce up some of these worship songs. And so I showed them some variations, if you will, on some chords and stuff, and how to sync their own stuff up by splitting the chords up. So if they were playing a G major chord, one guy would play G major, and I'd be like, now you play E minor up here. And they do that and put the chord together at the same time. They're like, oh, you know, the light of heaven shines down and all the rest of that stuff. But I was like, They're like, well, what if I want to get into weirder music? I'm like, well, listen, man, there's Christian bands doing death metal. And their minds could not actually comprehend that concept. Like, I was like, listen, man, I grew up a striper. So Under God's Command is a killer song. I'm pretty sure it's a song, but it's also a great album, or off the album there, right? So it's just like, we've known this stuff for a long time. It doesn't really matter. I mean, sure, you kind of tune out the lyrics a little bit if you're not overly religious, but there's no denying the music, if you will, right? So, and it just kept going, of course, until you have, Christian bands basically adopting the same sort of music mannerisms and whatnot. But that's my point now. Are the worship dudes going to go check out, some Christian death metal band? Probably not, right? But the point being is there's probably someone in there, and maybe they'll get turned on to Striper or something and be like, okay, we can introduce some of these heavier elements and stuff like that because it's packaged up in a way that is more palatable to them and what they're more comfortable with, rather than some guy screaming at you to worship the devil or whatever it is. They're giving inspirational quotes from the Bible, if you will. So sometimes that's all it takes to basically make the music more palatable, and then you can branch out from there. But the big takeaway is, especially with this last category of music, is to listen to things that basically put you in a spot where you're like, I'm not even really sure I like this, or you're outright, I absolutely hate this. And then just let it marinate for a little bit and be like, okay, no, it's still not for me. Give it a couple spins, or listen to like half the album and then come back to it a week later and listen to the other half and be like, nah, it's not my thing. Or maybe you'll be like, this isn't so bad. And then eventually you'll stumble onto another band that actually appeals to you more because of whatever your own personal music preferences and stuff like that. And then boom, you'll have taken a huge step in terms of your music education, because you're no longer being locked into, very rigid confines. Now all of a sudden it's a little bit more amorphous, if you will. It kind of moves with your mood. When you get a little bit more angry at the world and stuff, which always happens, you're kind of more over here with the extreme stuff. And as you're like feeling more sentimental, you kind of drift back the other way. And that's the way it should be. But without these influences, it's kind of hard to just come up with something from scratch. And why would you, when there's so many proto templates out there where you can listen to it and be inspired by it, and then just, try your hand at doing it in your own way to whatever degree that is. You may not end up sounding like Monumention. It might sound like something else. But again, I think people don't quite understand the idea of just experimental music. It means, experiment with how you are as a musician, and then try to do something that defies conventional norms. And the more you do that, you're going to be better off, of course. Right. End of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for hanging out with me again. I really appreciate every single one of you. I really, really do. We'll see you in the next one.